D&D isn't medieval, and the prison system proves it. Your characters shouldn't be forced to escape from jail either. There's a better way, and you'll have to watch on if you want to know what it is.
Man, prison breaks are fun, dude. What are you talking about? Normally, I'm right there with you, but on this, I'm not sure.
Well, when I say prison, does four walls, holding cells, a government holding you for trial, or to carry out your scheduling with a specialist team of guards and an infrastructure designed to support it sound about right?
Yeah, just add some dogs, watchtowers, and a dude in a white suit with glasses, and you got it. Cause the state of Mississippi doesn't care about your meteorological assessments.
Well, prisons are a modern invention. Dungeons, holding cells, and towers were used for political prisoners and high profile persons, or they were used for those who could not afford to pay their fees, their debts. If your D&D characters did something wrong, they would be held until court, fined, or simply executed. That's it. There's no jail or prison time, really.
But wait, what about the Mamertine prison in Rome? Built around 640 BC by Ancus Marcius, the Mamertine prison was in a sewer system beneath ancient Rome and was basically a large network of dungeons where prisoners were held in god-awful conditions covered with human waste. Forced labor on public works projects was also a common form of punishment too.
Yes, Tunk, but forced labor isn't prison, and in many cases, citizens were simply sentenced to slavery. Often, the ergastula, a primitive form of prison where unruly slaves were chained to workbenches and performed hard labor, is where they would be held. There were numerous prisons, not only in the capital of Rome. However, a regulated prison system did not exist, nor would it emerge for quite some time.
Okay, fine. D&D isn't medieval. We already know that. Some games have a Conan feel, some are Bronze Age, other are early Iron Age, so forth. So what's the point about prisons, Mr. Smarty Pants?
Well, prison breaks are fun, or at least some people think they are. But y'all are doing them all wrong. Wrong, I say.
Why? A modern prison break is either people sneaking into the prison or getting their friends out, either by stealth or by a kick-ass prison riot, or by the prisoners themselves breaking out, either on their own or with help from a patron, demon, or god or something. What's wrong with that?
Well, D&D prisons are modern prisons, Tonka, and modern prisons use the crowd. Specifically, the act of punishment became a tool. French prisons throughout the 18th century sought punishments that would fit the crime. Having the crowd witness punishments was part of the spectacle. Prison system was a system of spectacle, a system of systemic control, a means of enacting power upon the body, both directly and inherently.
Oh no, here he goes again.
In fact, according to Foucault in Discipline and Punish, the public spectacle of the execution or punishment mattered just as much as the crime being prevented, if not more so. It was thought that through spectacle there would be not only justice but crime prevention. The system would later be exchanged for a far more efficient system of domination, but you're going to have to see Foucault for details.
So what does that have to do with the prison break exactly?
Well, you have the heroes break out when they are on the scaffold, being transported to the scaffold or right as they're let out of prison. Prisoners could stop and have a beer at a local pub on their way to the rope. Some prisoners even managed to turn the crowd against their executioners. For example, in the failed execution of, and I quote, a murderer by the name of Pierre Dufort was to be hanged. Several times he had caught his feet in the steps, quote unquote. The crowd came to the conclusion that Dufort was being caused undue pain, and they rioted. The crowd then smashed the gallows and broke the executioner's ladder into pieces. Children carried off the gallows and threw it into the river. The condemned man was then taken to a cemetery so that he should not be recaptured by the law, quote unquote, and from there to the church of Saint Anthony. I'm not French. Don't at me. The archbishop gave him his pardon, had taken him to a hospital, and asked that particular care be taken of him. Lastly, adds the writer of the account, and I quote, "We had a new suit, 2 pairs of stockings, and shoes made for him. We dressed him in new clothes that from head to toe. Our colleagues gave him shirts, breeches, and a wig."
People play D&D and games like it for action and adventure. What you're suggesting seems to give players the opportunity to be rescued, fight for their way out of the tavern brawl, or win the crowd over to their side while they face the execution or scaffold. I mean, come to think of it, who wouldn't want to storm a heavily guarded fortress anyway?
Indeed, Kunka, for some, that may be the challenge that they want. Some PCs or DMs might look at a prison break and see the opportunity for a max stealth rogue to slip undetected with the invisible wizard to free the jailed barbarian, or the bard to talk their way in and weasel their way back out again with fake prisoner transfer. But I don't think these are nearly as awesome as turning the crowd against your executioner, having a hidden contact help you pick the cups while you're at a bar having a drink, having a new patron overpower the few guards that are surrounding you and helping you escape, or any of the other options we could come up with.
You know, when I was 10 and part of the Knuckleheads, that was the name we called our group of players, we killed the wrong person thinking they were the big bad, right? We got thrown into prison. Now, our DM was 12, and in his world, each section of the world had different laws and punishments for breaking them, right? In this area of his world, prisons were home to captured monsters that were raiding villages or predatory animals that were killing livestock, stuff like that. But the prisoners like that with the beasts and monsters and stuff were fed and taken care of, and tickets were sold so the public could come walk through like a zoo to see the different monsters and animals. Now, when non-monster inmates were sent to the prison, they were allowed one weapon and their armor and told the exit was somewhere in the prison, and it was up to them to survive and win their freedom by finding the exit. Also, the monsters and animals were starved for a couple of days before non-monster inmates were introduced into the populace to ensure that they would be on the menu.
I'm going to talk about the type of society you create when you create a prison system in your D&D game. That example created a society based around the spectatorship of the prison system. You're turning your punishment into, of course, a spectacle. And I'm going to use this as an excuse to finally cover Foucault. And since I'm covering him, I'm not finished yet. The primary goal of the prison, and of course by extension the government, keep in mind, is discipline. Through discipline, we achieve an efficient means of production. This is why a prison exists, because your D&D nation's government, like our own, cares really about controlling the means of production above all else.
What about the philosophy of punishment is meant to deter people from committing crimes? I know that in the East they still do public canings, and I know the threat of that would deter me of committing a crime. That would hurt so bad. So discipline in that case is used to dissuade folks from making bad life choices, if you will.
In a Foucauldian sense, discipline is a way of controlling the body. Bodies, like people like you and me, are made into docile things, objects for governmental control via institutions. Discipline is not so much a deterrent as it is a vehicle for basically spreading socio-eco-political control of and by governments. For Foucault, discipline is a series of techniques that control the body's operations. Through coercing and arranging the individual's movements and experience of space and time, devices such as timetables and military drills and process of exercise enact discipline. They're examples of it. Through discipline, the crowd is made individual. It isolates and localizes problems. Disciplinary power has 3 key elements: hierarchical observation, normalizing judgment, and, of course, examination. Observation and the gaze are key instruments of power. By these purposes, and through the human sciences, the notion of norm is developed. The notion of the norm is where both acceptable behavior in society and who are considered able-bodied come into the discussion. Consider what your TTRPG or RPG is constituting as normal. It is the medical and socioeconomic world, the hospitals, schools, jobs, etc., that discuss what it means, that dictate what it means to be able-bodied. Consider the same able-bodied prejudice that is in D&D.
We are certainly the police of the TTRPG world. We choose what goes on into our games, yeah. And I never thought about prison systems as affecting my D&D world, though. But laws do dictate how people behave. It's fun to write out weird laws the PCs have to get used to obeying, right? Like always walk backwards through a doorway after a noble enters first. Those laws could really throw them for a loop.
And it's more than just that, Tunka. I mean, we recently elected fascist, see the description for that, because some groups want Elon Musk, who I might add is an ultra-conservative, to take over control from Hasbro. Games are a microcosm of our real world. They might be escapist to an extent, but we cannot fully escape what's going on.
Well, all that aside, it's just fantasy. We need to make sure that we don't let the game language or our outside beliefs bleed into the bubble of our fantasy. The whole point of any RPG is to escape the craziness of the real world for a few hours, right?
That's exactly my point. You cannot separate the fantasy world from the world we live in. Give an example. In Bill's most recent game, I was witness to the player and the DM's view of monsters as being objectively, irredeemably evil, with no wiggle room. This is their definition of normal as dictated by the discipline of Gygax and others. They are perpetuating the same beliefs to new players. There's no nuance here. It's all in the name of fantasy. And that black and white thinking is emblematic of other types of black and white thinking. I can't imagine the DM's prison systems would be any different. The orcs would keep you as slaves or in squalor, like a Roman style prison we talked about in the beginning, and I can point to many other examples.
And the humans would give the opportunity for a kick-ass jailbreak scene. Both of these ideas work, but I agree. I think ours is more fun. Even if you have to be a downer about the whole Foucault dude or whatever all the time. But while I say every DM is free to run monsters how they want to, because at the end of the day, it's the DM and their group's game and world. That being said, even if monsters are evil, period, full stop, it doesn't mean that all monster encounters have to be combat encounters. That's why Gygax had a monster reaction table in the game. I mean, even a mustache man in Germany from World War II had peace talks with Chamberlain of England, and not just have him shot before the talk started. But back to the point, prison breaks, no matter how your party likes them, are fun.
Someday, Tunka, you will read Foucault and realize there is no escape for any of us. We are all trapped in a system of power relations that have us continually perpetuating and promulgating the system of power that surrounds us, even now. D&D does this too. I'll remind you the DM exists.
This is true. And those forces of power mean you must like, share, and subscribe if you've made it this far. It seems like we got all a lesson today from some dead French dude, whether we wanted it or not.
I gotta slip the education in there somewhere. Talk about prison breaks, and at least it's a little bit applicable to the game and disability rights. So, alright, y'all, take it easy.